Birthdays are special occasions. The car behind me is an Aston Martin DBS V8, and being delivered in 1971 means it's celebrating its 50th birthday this year. Today I feel like all my birthdays have come at once because of what I'm about to experience and share with you in the episode ahead. We're going to be having an in-depth look at the car, having a chat with the owner Steve, and going for a drive. If you've been following the channel for a while, you may recognise Steve from an earlier episode where we had a good look at his Citroen SM, so he's clearly a gentleman of fine taste. Grab yourselves a beverage and let's crack on with the episode. You're watching Craig on Cars.
So here it is up close, the Aston Martin DBS V8. Stick around for a few minutes, and once we've covered the background on the car, we'll hear from Steve and get out on the open road. Now, Aston Martin has a long history, first being founded in 1913, but it was in 1947 that David Brown Limited, a gears and machine tools manufacturer known for its tractors, bought Aston Martin, and it was from this point the company became famous for its Le Mans races and Grand Tours, and cars started wearing the moniker DB after David Brown himself. Culminating, of course, with the DBS that we see here, which was the last car produced under David Brown's ownership of Aston Martin. The DBS V8 was launched in 1969 to much fanfare as the world's fastest four-seater production car. Its 5.4 litre quad-cam V8 formed the basis of all Aston Martin power plants for the next 20 years, and the car was entirely hand-built, requiring 1,200 hours to complete. If you were looking to order a new DBS V8 in 1971, it would have cost you £5,300, or the equivalent of around £75,000 today. It doesn't sound that unreasonable, does it? But to give you some context, the average price of a house in the UK was £4,300, and a regular family car such as the Morris Marina would have cost you just over £900. But at least the lucky person ticking the boxes for their new Aston Martin could choose any colour they wanted at no extra charge. There were just 402 Aston Martin DBS V8s produced, and of those, only 95 were manual cars using the Bosch mechanical fuel injection system, this car being one of them. Coming up in a minute, Steve will tell us about his stewardship, and you'll get to see me looking absolutely petrified while I give it a drive. But first, let's quickly cover the interesting early provenance of the car. Delivered new to Sheffield-based construction tycoon Hamer Boot, coincidentally involved in the building of Pinewood Studios, now synonymous with a certain Aston Martin driving international super spy James Bond, the car was very much used as everyday transport, and even Boot's 20-year-old son would tear up the Derbyshire hills with his mates in the back after dropping his dad off to evening engagements. Apparently, Boot was a larger-than-life character who petrified any passenger brave enough to get in the DBS with him, and he was once caught speeding in the car twice on the same day, and insisted that the policeman who caught him take the car for a drive to see how fast and capable it was, which he did, but still gave Boot a ticket. The car has more recently been featured in various magazines and attended concourse events, and as Steve is about to tell us, is still very much driven. This is no garage queen, and that's exactly as it should be. Over to you, Steve.
This is something special. It's got everything that you'd want from an Aston Martin. It has the noise, it has what I think are very sleek lines, because this is the original V8 shape before they got a bit more magnolia trim and walnut. This is far more what I would call a traditional David Brown Aston Martin. I've had this car now for 21 years. It feels like it's almost part of me. It was red at the time, and I drove it like that for around 15 years, and it took a while before I was able to find out that in fact it was meant to be oyster shell, which is the colour you see it in today. It's so usable, it's incredibly reliable. I've done probably 60 to 70,000 miles in this car. I've used it pretty much constantly since I've bought it. My kids went in the back. I bought it because I wanted a 2+2, and I've been to Tesco shopping in it, I've been on holiday in it. It's been fantastic. It's remarkably similar to the DB5 and DB6 on the inside. So it's black, it's lots of chrome, fly-off handbrake. It's still very much a driver's car. The later cars tended to be more generally automatic transmission, more creature comfort, so you got a little bit lardy. Whereas what I like about this is that this is a proper manual gearbox, mechanical fuel injection, so it's the Bosch MFI system that was always intended to be the way they wanted to fuel the car. It was never intended to be carburetors. So it's and it just does what it says on the tin. It works fantastically well.
Fire it up and let's hit the road.
I can't believe that not only am I sat in an Aston Martin, but a proper David Brown Aston Martin. And I think what you said a few minutes ago when you were talking about Aston Martin's becoming a bit more Magnolia with the
Bit of
the interiors and stuff, like, you know.
I mean,
This is actually quite. It's comfortable, and the seats are very soft.
It's old school.
It's old school, and
It is.
it's quite sparse. It's almost American muscle car.
it is. It's that early 70s, designed in the late 60s. So it's before the Aston started to really go up market.
Yeah.
This is still a driver's car. Lots of dials, fly-off handbrake.
That noise. I hope that noise gets picked up in the camera, because that's just sublime. So it was a 5.4 litre engine from factory, but you've had this rebuilt, haven't you?
Yeah, it's had a full engine rebuild at Aston Engineering, and they just improve it slightly, I suppose you could say. It's still pretty much original spec in terms of the injection system, but it's been ported, slightly bigger valves, new pistons, so it's now 5.6.
Okay.
So it's a modest increase, but the fuel injection system has been recalibrated for the extra power.
So how much power do you think it has now?
So this was dynoed at 350 brake horsepower,
Which is very respectable by today's standards, even.
Yeah, plenty. So the engine is very, very responsive.
Yeah.
Very smooth, and considering it's using an injection system that was probably designed shortly after the Second World War.
Well, there's a modern one there.
Bosch were the leaders in mechanical fuel injection at the time, so Aston went to them for the system to be developed. Bosch developed it at their own cost because they wanted to be associated with Aston Martin.
Yeah.
And as you can tell, it's quite effective.
That's not going down the road like a 50-year-old car, is it?
It's the guys at Aston Engineering who set this up say it's the best DBS V8 they've ever driven.
Yeah.
It'll blow the doors off a carburettor, the later carburettor versions.
Yeah.
Even the X-Packs is very, very quick, and you can see when they tested it in the late 60s, 0 to 60 of 5.9 is very believable.
Yeah.
It'll be quicker than that now because it's definitely putting out more power than it would have done.
Of course.
Factory spec. So for the weight of the car, it's a heavy car. It's a really respectable performance.
Yeah.
Top speed of 161. Aston got over 170 from it in test. But it's the mid-range acceleration that's what Aston's all about. You can just, in any gear, you can pretty much just leave everything behind. So, and it's fantastic with the manual gearbox. The big heavy cars, people wanted, I suppose you've mentioned American muscle cars, automatics, but the automatics of the day were not good. They were power sapping. They used to call them slush boxes for a good reason.
And would they be three speed?
So they would have been a 3-speed box. So the ZF manual box on this is just superb. I haven't had to touch it. It's not been rebuilt. It just works.
Yeah.
It was built to take power. Lamborghini used it. A few other guys building supercars used it as well.
And this is an early DBS.
Yeah, it's a chassis 96, so it's one of the one of the earlier ones. They only made 400 and something. So
that's in, I guess, the initial V8 run, but then of course they restyled the car, Series 1, 2 and 3.
yeah, Series 1, 2 and 3. So after David Brown sold the company in 72, the car was redesigned with single headlights instead of the what we call the 4 headlight car.
Yeah.
It went to carburetors for simplicity, and a lot of the decisions around fueling were made because of US emissions regs.
Yeah.
They originally fitted this mechanical fuel injection system because it was more easy to tune it for emissions regs, but as the regs changed, they went back to carbs. Carbs were simpler. I suppose this is a lot of people didn't really understand how this system worked. It's actually relatively straightforward. Once it's set up, you just forget it. It doesn't need fiddling with. So it's very effective in that point of view. But yeah, the later Series 1, then Series 2 and 3, they got a bit slower until they started, really upping the outputs later on in the 80s with the electronic fuel injection. So they went back to the fuel injection, but of course by then it was electronic. What I love about this car is, as you say, the fact that it's a true DB. And not too many frills. This car doesn't have air conditioning. You could have had aircon as an optional extra.
Although there is a switch here saying fresh air.
Fresh air. It's got good ventilation. It's got everything good. I mean, everything works very well on this car. It doesn't feel like a 50-year-old car when you drive it. Obviously, it's power steering, power brakes. Aston were renowned for very, very effective braking systems. The famous 0 to 100 back to 0 test that they used to do on all their cars.
But it's got the traditional Smiths dials.
So yeah, a fine array of Smiths dials with a speedo that goes up to 200.
Of course, famously, this car was, when it was first released, the fastest production car, I believe, 160 mile an hour. Quoted.
Yeah, it was. It was never really called a supercar, but really it was in the supercar league in terms of performance. But Aston didn't really want to position it as a supercar.
No, but they've always been known, haven't they, as Grand Tourers.
It's a Grand Tourer, and that's what they wanted. They wanted something that the Americans would buy, that people would buy instead of an Italian car for touring across Europe. One of the road tests decided they would take it to Modena, and their road test was from Newport Pagnell to Modena in time for tea.
We're off. Huge concentration. Do you know the gearbox and the clutch aren't as heavy as I thought they might be?
No, once you get used to they've got a fairly manly feel to them, I suppose, but they're not particularly heavy. You can drive the car all day and it's not tiring. Big comfy seats. The difference between this and the earlier DBs, like a DB5 or a DB6, is the seats and the space. It's a different kettle of fish driving this all day long to one of the previous DBs.
So what was it that drew you to this car when you first bought it 20 years ago? Why one of these?
I think it just goes back to the fact I was brought up in the 60s, so it was James Bond. The Persuaders was on the telly with Roger Moore driving one of these. So it was always there in my psyche, I think, as one of those cars you always wanted when you were a kid. It was Aston Martin had become the car, after Goldfinger and the DB5. And of course this was on Her Majesty's Secret Service.
That's right.
And I think
the Living Daylights as well, was it?
No, that was the Living Daylights was the later V8. If you're talking in the 80s, but I think it was just always liked the shape, always liked the fact that it had this big V8 engine, and it's a beautifully engineered engine, quad cam. It's the lovely sound it makes is partly because of the way it was designed. You know, you could put an American pushrod engine in this and get the same power, but it wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't have that lovely sound, and it wouldn't be the same at all. I think with a car like an Aston Martin, the heart is the very heart and soul of the car.
And you can feel that, just you can tell what's in front of you. It's something very special.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a long bonnet to look out over, isn't it? Knowing what's underneath it.
And you can see the air scoop as well in the middle.
Yeah, you do get a bit of a sense of occasion.
Again, just looking forward, the wheel with the DB in the middle of the wheel and those dials in front.
Yeah, I think the fact that it's the last true DB means something. It was the last car that David Brown introduced, and they really were very brave breaking away from the beautiful curves of the DB5 and the DB6. But when they announced this car and launched it at the Earls Court Motor Show, the orders flooded in. People loved it. Of course, it had a completely different performance to a DB6 or a DB5. This is much, much faster, and that's what they wanted. They needed something to take on the big muscle cars in America, to take on Ferrari and Lamborghini in Europe, and they did it. But it's very tractable, it's very easy to drive. My wife Andrea drives this car without any bother at all. My daughter Jessica has driven it. She got in it and just drove it like she'd always been driving it. There's no
but
drama.
I guess she grew up with it.
She grew up with it.
And what cars grew up with.
I didn't think she'd like it. It's nothing like a modern car. It is quite. You can feel the weight in it, can't you?
You can feel the weight, but it's the character. With probably 2 miles since I got in the car, and it's oozing character, and it's the experience, the smell, the feel. I can't quite believe I'm driving a classic Aston Martin.
I love the view out the back as well. It's like looking out through a post box.
Yeah.
It's a very sharply raked rear screen, so you get this little narrow view of the world that you're leaving behind, which is really characteristic of these cars as well.
Because the guy that designed the car, William Towns, I suppose of all the British car designers, is probably one of the fewer recognised, but only joined Aston Martin I think a year before this was first unveiled, and beforehand had only really been responsible for designing things like car seats, and had an input with the Hillman Hunter.
That's right.
Of which this has the same shares the rear lights, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah, no, this was his big breakthrough in design, and of course he went on to design the amazing Wedge Lagonda. Which I personally really like. It's not to everybody's taste, but I think
I've seen one. Oh, don't stall. Let me just concentrate on getting out, and I'll continue with it.
You're doing pretty well for a first time.
And we're off. So the Lagonda, I've only seen one. I think it's the London Classic Motor Show a few years ago, and I was amazed by the size of the thing.
It's got amazing presence.
Humongous, isn't it?
It's just got amazing presence, and fantastic to drive. Just an amazing car.
And of course, just a very controversial car for its styling. And of course, then he went on to design like a modular concept car, the Hustler. I think after he left Aston Martin.
He did all sorts of interesting stuff. I mean, he was really he had some really interesting projects that he was involved with, and he did create some really groundbreaking cars.
And he was only 32 when he designed this.
But I think they needed somebody young and looking towards the future. The 70s were changing everything, and they needed something that was ready for the 70s, and this was the car. And of course, course, you can't deny the beauty of the DB5s and 6s. I would love a DB5 and a 6, but of course the prices now on those cars have just become absolutely stratospheric, and these have started to appreciate in value, but for a long time these were not loved. You could buy these very cheaply indeed. It's only now really in the last 5 years they've really begun to be appreciated. I mean, just in rarity terms, you know, they made, in comparative terms, they made thousands of DB6s, thousands of DB5s. You know, there are 95 manual DBS V8s in the world.
And just for the significance, I think that this car has for what Aston Martin is today, being the last David Brown car. The engine was used for what, 25 years before they moved over to Ford and Mercedes.
Yeah, this was the last engine designed and built in-house. It's the last true Aston Martin engine. So there's a lot about this car that people are realising now that this is a really special DB. And of course the manual versions are incredibly sought after. I was really pleased when I found out that this colour it's in now was the original colour. They only made 3 in oyster shell.
It looks so good in this colour.
It's a lovely colour.
It really does.
Well, you nailed that. Just needed a bit of dual carriageway really to give it the beams.
Here we go. Am I going to stall now as we put up? Oh. Thank you. Not quite sure what to put in words what that experience was like. I said at the beginning of the episode that today felt like all my birthdays had come at once. Well, scratch that. It's birthdays and Christmases. This is an early Aston Martin DBS V8. I still can't quite believe that I actually got to drive this, and I'm so grateful for Steve for giving me that experience. If you've enjoyed today's video, please do subscribe to the channel if you're not already a subscriber. There'll be more Craig on Cars specials coming in the months ahead, where I get to have a look at other amazing cars and chat to their owners, as well as updates on my very own BMW E31 8 Series, the Rust project that's currently underway, and ownership experience. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon. And then just put it back up here, is it?
Yeah, you have to press the button down to engage it. So this is you have to press the button in, otherwise it won't lock. It's a real hold the button in. It's a real knack. It's very hard to do. Shall I show you?
Yeah, go ahead. There we go. We've landed.
And yeah, there you go.
That could have been a first take.
That was excellent.
Yeah. Is there can I move forward? Or?
Yeah, which side is it? It's on that side. You twist the knob down away from you, and then it will slide. So push it down to the floor.
Can't find the knob.
Should be on that side. On this side, is it? Oh, it is on this side. I do beg your pardon. Right, yeah. Push it down to the floor, and then it will.
Okay. Perfect. Now I was prepared for the opening bit. After driving that, I've got absolutely no idea what I'm going to say.
Glad you enjoyed it.
Thank you. It was a very special experience.
Good. I hope you press record.